It's good to spend a few minutes with longtime NHL defenseman Nick Boynton, who recently opened up in a Players Tribune article about the physical and mental struggles that he's going through now that his career is done. And he relates them to repeated hits to the head. He estimates between 20 and 30 concussions that he had during his playing career that spanned more than a decade. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Ever since you released this first-person account in the Players Tribune, I've had a lot of listeners respond, hockey fans, maybe hearing about these struggles and these complications for the first time. What's been the reaction to you since you published that article?
It's been overwhelming, that's for sure. It's just the outpouring of support has been amazing. It was a difficult thing to do, and it's difficult to talk about, but I'm so glad I did it. I've gotten response from people all over the sports world and, just all over society in general. So it's been overwhelming positively, and it's scary, how far we have to go to do better for players and for people in general.
Have you heard from anyone inside the NHL fraternity or maybe from the league itself?
The silence from the league has been, I'm kind of surprised. I haven't heard from a lot of friends that maybe I thought I'd hear from, but I also sort of understand that. I worked for the league for 3 years, and it's difficult to keep quiet about the things there, but I've heard from so many players in the game, guys that are retired. It's been great, and I know I'm not alone, which is great, but it's unfortunate. Sometimes you wish or you want to hope you're alone in all of this, but it's definitely a bigger problem than I think people realize.
I've had some of these similar conversations with former NFL players, and they come to a point once they've retired and gotten away from the game where they decide it no longer benefits them to keep quiet, and it's important for them to speak up. What was the point for you, Nick, when you decided enough is enough? I need to share what's going on with me. I need to tell people.
Well, it goes back to the old tapes, Gary Bettman and Jeremy Jacobs of the Boston Bruins just denying science under oath. They knew what was happening to guys, much like the NFL knew what was going on, and they hid the science. And, some of the guys I mentioned in my story were my teammates and my friends, and I had no idea what they were dealing with at the time. As close as I was to a guy named Wade Belak, who was a player who took his life, but I just want to get it down. I needed to get it down on paper so people sort of understand. My wife and my kids and my family deals with this on a daily basis, and they didn't sign up for that. People can complain and say I'm a spoiled athlete and whatever, but my family never signed up for this. They don't, benefit from any of this, so it's got to get out there. There's just denying it is the absolute wrong thing for the game. The best thing for the game is admit there's a problem, sink some money into fixing the problem, and doing a better job treating these injuries.
Nick, why do you think the league does that?
I don't know. They're making money off of guys, and they're making good money. I don't know why they deny it, especially at this point in time when the science is pretty obvious. I want to help the game at the end of the day. I want players to be safer. I want parents to be more educated in what goes on. I want players coming into the league to realize their union isn't helping them in this way, or when it comes to mental illness or concussions, and the league, they're complicit in denying science. And nobody told me that going into the league. So if I can open up and tell these guys and these parents who are letting their kids play hockey and play through injuries, what the outcome may be, then hopefully that makes a change.
We're spending a few minutes with former NHL defenseman Nick Boynton, who recently penned a sobering, eye-opening account of his post-hockey struggles for the Players Tribune. It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence on CBS Sports Radio. You would think that the Players Association would be advocates for you and for others who play in the NHL, would want the league to step forward, would want there to be more education. But the union's not doing anything either, Nick?
No, the union is the union and the league. The guys that work for the players union, the players in the league right now have to look at their own union and consider if they're doing anything at all for their benefit. And I think you'll see here in the next little while questions are going to be raised. I think the union's not doing what the union needs to, much like the other unions in professional sports aren't doing what they need to. NFL, is a prime example. Those guys are struggling so much, and they don't even have guaranteed contracts. I mean, it's not right, and it's a difficult thing to talk about. But I think players and families have the right to know what they're signing up for.
Agreed. The NFL has certainly tried to amend its policies when it comes to head injuries and concussions. So we have really strict protocols now. There are independent neurologists on the sidelines. There can be doctors calling for timeouts to try to get players off the field if they look like they need to have a test done. And yet still, there are players that manage to get back on the field. But considering what the NFL has done, is that a possible prototype for how the NHL might amend some of its policies?
Well, I think the NHL definitely has to go in a different direction, because denying it isn't a direction at all. But the NFL's I can't really speak to the NFL. They got their own problems. They have major, major problems. And, the fact that they can get cut after sustaining an injury, there's no way those guys are going to speak up when they're playing. So it's just it's a matter of time and when those guys are going to get injured, and those guys are going to suffer head injuries, and those guys are going to die. And the NHL is just taking a very similar line along with our union. You've got to make changes. Admit that these injuries cause problems. Until you do that, you can't fix anything.
Nick, one of the things I really appreciated about your letter in the Players Tribune is that you didn't pass the buck, so to speak. You accepted responsibility for the decisions that you made, some of which you would like to change now. And you advocate for a partnership with the NHL. You're not saying it should all be the league that bears responsibility. But how does that work? What positive steps can the league take to try to move forward in this area?
Well, they definitely need, I would love the union to take back over paying the trainers and the doctors. That would be one way for the players to protect themselves, is to have doctors check them out that aren't being paid by the teams and by the league. The players need to make changes at the union level to begin with, because Donald Fear and the rest of them at the union don't have the players' best interests in mind. I'd like independent neurologists, much like the NFL, on every team to make those decisions, take those decisions out of the players' hands, because the players shouldn't be making decisions when they've just received a concussion. That needs to be taken out of their hands. Until they start doing stuff like that and then admitting that these injuries cause damage down the road, it's just such a long way to go.
Former NHL defenseman Nick Boynton is continuing to speak up about his post-hockey struggles that are related to the many hits to the head and head injuries he had when he played. It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence on CBS Sports Radio. Nick, at any point in the league, from when you started as a rookie until the time that you retired, did the teams that you played for or the league itself ever address head injuries, or what a concussion looks like, or what to do if, in fact, you were experiencing some of those symptoms?
Nope, not at all. I sat through so many drug awareness meetings at the start of every year, meetings about people trying to take advantage of you, this and that. And, good people, bad people, what to look out for, and not one informational session on brain injuries. I mean, it's, looking back now, it's embarrassing, but you know what? I should have been smarter and I should have been stronger at the time to stand up and make my voice heard. I live with that fact that it took me this long to talk about it, but that's what I've got to deal with, and hopefully somehow between me and Dan Carcillo and the other guys speaking up, some kind of change is made.
The more voices, certainly the better chance that you will be heard. Nick, in your column, you mentioned having some good days and getting some treatment that's helping you. What do those good days look like?
Since, I got treatment, Dan Carcillo helped me get treatment at the Brain Plasticity Clinic down in Orlando. And my days have been a lot better since then. It's just a different treatment. It's a treatment that guys don't know is out there. It helped me with my vision and my focusing, and it was little things, but it made such a big difference, and it gave me a bit of hope. And my days are good. And this sort of getting my story out there, it gives me, some purpose to get better and find answers and help other people.
I'm so glad you're getting help now. When I was in Minneapolis at the Super Bowl, I had a chance to sit down with former NFL tight end Jermichael Finley, and he had a very similar story to yours because it was a really violent hit to the head that knocked him out of the league. And I asked him about the darkest days because he was also getting treatment. And I know it's a personal question, but Nick, what were those darkest days like for you?
It wasn't good. It was, I have a lot of anger from playing and people I dislike and people I'd love to get in find in a dark alley and take care of. But I can tell you, I wouldn't wish this my darkest days. I mean, today's a good day, but when I have dark days, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies. And it's just something that is so overwhelming. Physical pain is nothing to me, that is nothing. This just takes it to such a different level, and to start thinking about, the alternatives that I talk about in the piece, that's about as dark as you want to get and as painful as you want to get, and it's not fun. Whether it's from a sports injury or whether that's what you're dealing with, I sympathize and just what's being done by the companies and the teams that I work for isn't good enough. They're not helping people. You want to help your employees. You want to help people get better. They're not helping us.
Nick Boynton is with us here after hours on CBS Sports Radio, a former NHL defenseman who is trying to share his story about how his time in the league and the hits to the head are now affecting his quality of life as he is a family man trying to raise kids and be a husband. Nick, there have been some other athletes, current athletes even, who have shared their struggles with anxiety and depression. And their situations are a little different, but some of the symptoms are the same. Kevin Love, for instance, also used the Players Tribune to share his perspective. How encouraging is it to you to hear other people opening up and becoming vulnerable as opposed to keeping quiet?
Oh, trust me, it's so difficult to speak out. I'm not upset with anybody who can't talk about this. It's not easy to talk about. It is so difficult, but I think, society as a whole, it's getting easier to talk about, and just the more and more people can share their stories, obviously, it's been overwhelming for me, and the love I've received from talking about it is great. And, if I help somebody open up about something, then I've done a good job and a good thing, and I hope more of that comes from telling my story.
You said your son really likes hockey. Do you sit down and watch it with him at all?
Not really. I mean, we watch the playoffs. I cheer for friends that are, I've got friends that are still playing. But I was working with the Coyotes for the first couple of years of his life, so he sort of had an idea, I guess. They listen to the broadcast and stuff, and he loves to skate. He doesn't quite understand what hockey is is now. I just, as a parent, it would be difficult, to let my son play in the NHL knowing that he is putting his life on the line and they are not helping him in any way, shape, or form. It's just a tough thing as a parent to think about.
In the wake of this conversation, I have a lot more that I want to process, and I hope the listeners are thinking about everything as well. And I know that you've done a lot of interviews since that Players Tribune article came out late last week, but I thank you so much for a couple of minutes because I want to be part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem. Thanks again, Nick.
Absolutely, Amy. Thank you so much for your support, and I appreciate you helping me share my story. Thank you so much.